Appreciate you all being here today. This is an incredibly important topic, one of dire consequences for those people who are involved. I think we're all aware of it, and we all care very much so. So I would never accuse anybody of anything other than that. I think everybody here really cares. That's why we're here. With that said, I'd also like to take an opportunity to recognize Governor Kemp in Georgia and First Lady Marty for their efforts to clean up what we believe is a hub for child trafficking in Atlanta, which we've really tried to tackle and take it very seriously in our home state. I think it's interesting, Ms. Ambassador, that we're currently in the Tier 1 category, I believe, correct? And
yes,
we've been there. Have we ever not been in Tier 1?
We have not.
Okay. And I think the Tier 2 category, I'm just going to read off the list of what it's defined as far as what because we're researching what defines each category. Tier 2 is countries whose governments do not fully meet the Trafficking Victims Protection Act minimum standards, but are making significant efforts to bring themselves to compliance with those standards, and for which the estimated number of victims of severe forms of trafficking is very significant or significantly increasing, and their country is not taking proportional concrete actions. One thing that disturbs me, and I mentioned before that I'd just come back from Bangladesh and Cox's Bazar, where they have 1 million people there, and they're in Tier 2, and I'm sure Malaysia is even worse. I didn't see them, Myanmar, I didn't even see them on the list, but I'm sure they're not doing well. You have 1 million people, but each person has strict accountability. We can literally keep track of every single person there. Why? Because they have to subsist on $8 per person per month. So they track that pretty incredibly strictly, right? So we have good accountability of people. Here in the United States, we lack the same accountability. One thing that disturbs me greatly is we have a southern border. We've had at least 10 million people come across in the last few years. Of that, at least in the 21-22 era, we had 85,000 children come across, which a significant portion of them were handed over to people. We have no idea who they are in relationship to the children. We stopped the DNA testing. We stopped DNA testing, which we knew at least around 9% were unrelated genetically. So then we stopped it for some reason, knowing that that's a problem, knowing that the coyotes and traffickers of children would use that against those children. We stopped testing people genetically. Single parents coming across who could be kidnapping their children from the other parent. We don't do anything about that. We have up to 70% of all women being sexually exploited as they come across the southern border, and we have 2 million that got away. We have no idea anything about them, including the children that get away. They haven't even been addressed. So how is it the United States is doing a good job and Bangladesh is doing a bad job in comparison? Because it seems a bit hypocritical to me.
Thank you. And you actually bring up a really good point that I want to take the opportunity to sort of clarify. The Trafficking in Persons report compares a government's efforts during the reporting period to how that government did during the previous reporting period. It doesn't actually compare countries to one another. The way that it was wisely set up is that we have metrics and pieces of data that we compare for this reporting period versus how that country did the reporting period before.
So addressing that, apples to apples, United States to United States. Before we tested people DNA, before we had a secure border, before people weren't coming over and unaccounted for, before we didn't have 85,000 children coming across with no accountability, how are we not doing worse in our tier comparison to the previous years? That's my question.
In this reporting period, I'll tell you some of the specific pieces of data that we did consider in this analysis. One is that more money was spent for services. Another was that the administration deployed the most agents and officials ever.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there because I hear this all the time. Money spent. How's that doing for schools? Money spent. How's that doing for the border? More Border Patrol agents to do what? Process people in. That's why they're not undocumented migrants. They're very well documented illegal invaders, just to make a point.
Allow me to give a different number. We had an increase in the number of federal prosecutions and an increase in the number of convictions for both sex trafficking and labor trafficking as compared to the year before. We also did...
How many by numeric standards did you have an increase in? How many more prosecutions, numerically?
I do not have that figure in front of me, but I'm happy to follow up.
Okay, so I'm just going to make another point. When you have 10 million people come across the border, you have no genetic testing, you know that people are being sexually exploited, you don't know which children belong to who, I think that's a severe lack of accountability. I think it's hypocritical, and I think we need to stop with the cooking of the books. We need to have accountability. We should go back to genetic testing. We should not be encouraging people to come across the border masked by coyotes who basically exploit child trafficking, human trafficking, illegal drug trafficking. This is a catastrophe of the southern border that is absolutely, undeniably affecting children in the most negative and egregious ways. We should be ashamed of ourselves. And I don't think you're understanding my point when I'm saying we are not doing our job. As a tier 1 nation who's supposed to be leading the way, the United States, with all the technologies, all the things we stand for, not giving children the right representation when it comes to accountability and making sure they are not raped and trafficked and taken away from their families because we just don't know. And that's the truth. And that's what I want to leave you with. Because I think unless you can explain how we have better accountability than we did 4 years ago, I just don't think it's worth the conversation until we can actually get back to that point.
I think that one of the things is that the president independently issued a proclamation which suspended irregular entry until the numbers of unlawful crossings had dropped. And he did this independently, and that is something that happened during this past reporting period, which was an improvement from the year before.
So he suspended what?
He suspended all irregular entries.
So there's no, what is a regular versus an irregular entry?
The border, in an effort to have a safe and humane and protected border, there is a requirement that if you want to present for seeking asylum or for some other reason, you have to utilize the CBP One app and use it at a particular entry. And they are funneling in an effort to do really what you're saying so that you have a better idea of who is coming in so that people are not coming in without us knowing who they are. So there were efforts made. But I will also point out that this is also, we get our information about the government efforts, not just from what the government gives to us. We receive information from civil society organizations, NGOs, service providers.
I've been to the border.
And
I've seen it, and I'm just going to interrupt you for a second because we're kind of out of time. I want to respect Mr. Moylan's time. But let's get real. Because you filled out an app, because you said the child belongs to me, because you're a coyote or you're whomever, and you're maybe or maybe not related to a child, doesn't give me any confidence that we've improved accountability. I think it's all talk. It's all paperwork. It can all be absolutely cheated on. We have no better accountability. We don't know who these children are with. We don't know if they're related to them. I think we've been absolutely supporting a farce when it comes to accountability. It needs to stop now, and I'm going to end with that. Thank you.